At just 23, Sarah never imagined she'd have to take on the role of a parent for her younger sister, Emma. After the sudden loss of their parents, she was thrust into a world of unfamiliar responsibilities, balancing work, finances, and the emotional weight of her new reality. Together, Sarah and Emma navigated their grief, trying to turn their sorrow into strength while building a home that could sustain them through life's storms. But when doubts from extended family and financial hardships challenged their new life, Sarah made a quiet promise to do everything in her power to give Emma the life and love she deserved. As Emma's confidence grew, Sarah watched her sister blossom in ways that honored their parents' legacy, turning their journey of loss into one of resilience and hope. How did these sisters transform their lives from heartbreak to a new beginning? And what lessons did they uncover about family, healing, and unconditional love? Stay tuned to see how Sarah's strength and Emma's courage helped them rebuild their world. And if this story of family and resilience resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to join us for more inspiring tales. Sarah sat alone on the small wooden chair by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight dance across the walls of the old house she and her younger sister Emma once called home. The room was still and quiet, peaceful even, but deep inside, Sarah felt as though her heart was splintering piece by piece. Just a week ago, her life was entirely different, warm, filled with love and the unwavering support of her parents. Now the silence in the house served as a painful reminder that she and Emma were all each other had left. Through the half-open door of the bedroom, she could see Emma sitting on the bed, clutching the stuffed bear their mother had given her. Her sister looked smaller and more fragile than ever, her gaze lost as if trapped in an endless nightmare. Sarah knew that Emma still hadn't accepted the reality of their parents' sudden passing, and she herself was struggling too. Both sisters were deep in grief, but Sarah knew she couldn't stay submerged in sorrow forever. She had to be strong for Emma, for herself, and for the promise she'd made to their parents. At the funeral, watching those pure white flowers drape over her parents' caskets, Sarah had silently vowed that she would take care of Emma, protect her, no matter what life threw their way. Remembering that promise, Sarah rose and walked into Emma's room. She sat down beside her sister, gently placing a hand on her small, trembling shoulder. "Emma, I know this hurts," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm hurting too, but we still have each other. I'll always be here for you and we'll get through this together, okay?" Emma looked up, her eyes wet with tears. She said nothing, just nodded slightly and held Sarah's hand tightly, as though afraid her sister might slip away too. The first morning, back at Sarah's tiny apartment, she was overwhelmed by the weight of her new reality. Not long ago, she was just a young woman in her early 20s, figuring out her first job and living on her own for the first time. Now she was a guardian, a protector, shouldering a responsibility that felt almost impossible for someone her age. That morning, as she clumsily prepared a simple breakfast for the two of them, she realized she didn't even know where to start. She'd never been responsible for anyone but herself before, and now her whole world had flipped upside down. In that moment, she desperately wished her parents were still here to guide her, to help her figure out how to be a strong, wise, and loving big sister for Emma. After breakfast, Sarah drove Emma to school. The drive was quiet, with Emma staring out the window, her face expressionless. Sarah tried to offer some encouraging words, but Emma responded only with a vague nod. Her sister's silence made Sarah anxious. She knew Emma was suffering, but she wasn't sure how to help her cope or how to comfort her. A growing sense of fear gnawed at Sarah. She worried she wasn't strong enough, not patient enough, not resilient enough to step into a parental role for Emma. She didn't know how to handle the silent tears that Emma shed each night, the nightmares that plagued her sleep, or the long, quiet stretches between them where neither seemed to have the right words to say. But Sarah knew that giving up wasn't an option. Because of her promise to their parents, because of the love she had for Emma, she was determined to try her hardest to care for her sister, no matter what it took. Later that night, after everything had quieted down, Sarah sat by the window, sipping tea, trying to steady herself. Their lives were now filled with struggles and uncertainty, but she clung to the belief that with love and determination, she'd find a way forward. She glanced toward Emma's room, where her sister was fast asleep, after a long, draining day. Outside, the moonlight cast a soft glow across the room, soothing some of the shadows in Sarah's heart. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that as long as she had Emma by her side, she would never be truly alone. The next morning, Sarah woke up early to prepare Emma for school. She made toast and scrambled eggs, doing her best to remember how her mum had always managed to make even the simplest meals feel like an act of love. Sarah hesitated as she set Emma's plate down on the table, unsure if she was doing enough to comfort her. Her sister sat down without a word, picking at her food absent-mindedly. The silence between them felt heavy, and Sarah could feel the distance that grief had driven between them. After a few minutes, Sarah reached across the table to gently touch Emma's hand. "I know it's hard," she said softly. "I miss them too. But we're going to be okay, Emma. I promise." Emma glanced up briefly, her eyes glistening, but didn't respond. Sarah understood. Words wouldn't bring their parents back, and no amount of comforting could erase the ache in their hearts. Still, she wished Emma would let her in, just a little bit. The school drop-off was as silent as breakfast had been. Emma hugged her backpack close to her chest as she walked up to the school entrance, glancing back only once before disappearing into the building. Sarah watched until she was out of sight, a tight feeling in her chest. She wanted so desperately to make things better for Emma, but every day felt like another reminder of how much they had lost. Later that day, Sarah sat in her tiny office, staring blankly at her computer screen. The workload was piling up, but her mind was miles away, replaying memories of family dinners and Sunday mornings spent lounging together. Her boss, Mr. Davis, noticed her distraction and stepped into her office, a concerned look on his face. "Sarah," he said gently, "if you need to take some time off, please don't hesitate. I know things have been incredibly difficult for you." Sarah gave him a grateful smile, but she shook her head. "Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'll be okay. I think I need to keep working. It keeps me grounded." He nodded, his gaze sympathetic but understanding. "Just know that you're not alone. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask." The kindness in his words brought an unexpected sting of tears to her eyes. She blinked them back quickly and refocused on her work. She knew she couldn't afford to fall apart, not now. Emma needed her to stay strong. That evening, Sarah picked Emma up from school, determined to break the silence between them. She decided to take a detour on the way home, stopping by a small park they used to visit with their parents. The place was quiet, save for a few children playing on the swings and a couple strolling along the path. "Do you remember coming here with Mom and Dad?" Sarah asked as they walked down the familiar path. Emma nodded, a faint smile breaking through the sadness on her face. "Yeah, Dad would push me so high on the swing that I thought I'd touched the sky." Sarah laughed softly. the memory warming her heart. And Mum would tell him to be careful, but he'd just laugh and say, "Emma's as tough as they come." For a few moments, it felt like a piece of their old life was with them again, filling the empty spaces. They sat down on a bench, looking out at the playground, and Sarah felt Emma's small hand slip into hers. "Do you think they're still watching over us?" Emma asked in a small voice. Sarah squeezed her hand. "I do. I think they're with us every day, in all the little things we do." Emma leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder, and in that moment, the silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like an unspoken understanding, a shared promise to keep moving forward together. When they returned home, the apartment didn't feel as empty as it had before. They spent the evening cooking dinner together, with Emma chopping vegetables while Sarah stirred a pot on the stove. They laughed as Emma struggled to cut a particularly stubborn carrot, and Sarah realized how much she had missed seeing her sister's smile. After dinner, they sat on the couch wrapped in blankets, watching one of Emma's favorite movies. Sarah's mind wandered to the responsibilities ahead, the challenges they would face, but for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope. They had each other, and perhaps that was enough. The days continued, and slowly Sarah and Emma fell into a routine. Mornings were still quiet, but Emma began to talk more, asking Sarah about her day and telling little stories about her friends at school. Sarah cherished these conversations, feeling as though they were finding their way back to each other, one small step at a time. But it wasn't always easy. There were nights when Sarah would hear Emma crying softly in her room, and her own heart would ache with the helplessness of not knowing how to take away her sister's pain. She would sit by Emma's door, whispering words of comfort that neither of them could hear, hoping that somehow her presence would reach Emma through the walls. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to pay bills, she realized how tight their finances had become. Between her regular expenses and the added costs of caring for Emma, things were quickly spiraling. She was afraid to admit just how close they were to struggling, but the weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders. She needed to make a plan, something that would keep them stable and allow her to provide for Emma in the long term. The next day at work, Sarah approached Mr. Davis about the possibility of taking on more hours or even a promotion. She explained her situation, trying to keep her voice steady, though the vulnerability she felt was overwhelming. Mr. Davis listened attentively, nodding with understanding. "I'll see what I can do, Sarah. You've always been a hard worker, and I'm sure we can figure something out. But remember, you're already doing an amazing job, both here and for your sister." The reassurance gave Sarah a small boost of confidence. It wasn't much, but every bit helped as she navigated this new life as Emma's guardian. In the days that followed, Sarah and Emma's new life slowly took shape. Mornings were early, filled with the scent of toast and the occasional sound of Emma's sleepy murmurs as she shuffled to the kitchen. Sarah packed lunches for both of them, a task that reminded her painfully of their mother. She used to do the same, slipping little notes of encouragement into their bags. Inspired, Sarah scribbled a quick "I love you" on a sticky note and slipped it into Emma's lunch bag. At school, Emma still felt out of place. Her friends offered condolences, their words tentative and unsure, but none of them could fully understand what it was like. During recess, Emma found herself sitting alone, watching as the other kids laughed and played, their lives as vibrant as ever. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, but every time she felt herself sinking, she would reach into her bag, feel for Sarah's note, and remember her sister's promise. It was a small comfort, but it helped her feel less alone. After school, Sarah would pick her up, and they'd spend the drive home talking about Emma's day. At first, Emma's answers were brief, but little by little, she started sharing more. She told Sarah about her classes, her friends, and the books she was reading. It was a fragile but precious connection that grew between them, an unspoken agreement to rebuild their lives in whatever way they could. One Friday afternoon, Sarah decided to make a special dinner. She and Emma had been working hard, adjusting to their new lives, and she wanted to do something that reminded them both of the warmth and joy their family once had. She picked up the ingredients for their mom's favorite pasta recipe on the way home, remembering how their mother used to hum while she cooked, filling the house with a sense of security and love. As they cooked together, Emma's laughter echoed in the kitchen. The two of them joked about their clumsy chopping and how their mother would have gently corrected them. For a while, it was as though their mother was there with them, her presence lingering in the familiar smells and sounds. That night, as they ate, the apartment felt a little less empty, and for the first time since the accident, both sisters felt a glimmer of peace. But the peace didn't last long. Emma's grief manifested in ways that Sarah hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they were going over Emma's homework, Emma threw her pencil down in frustration. "This is stupid," she muttered, crossing her arms and looking away. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Emma, it's okay. We can go through it together." "What part is confusing you?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, her hands clenching into fists. "It's not the homework. It's everything. I hate this. I hate that Mom and Dad are gone. I hate that we're alone." Sarah's heart broke as she watched her sister struggle with emotions too big for her young age. She knelt down next to Emma, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "I know, Emma. I know it's not fair. I miss them so much too, but I'm here, and I'll always be here for you. We'll get through this together, okay?" Emma pulled away, her face red with anger and grief. "But you're not Mom and Dad. You're just Sarah." The words stung, but Sarah understood. Emma wasn't angry at her. She was angry at the world for taking away the people she loved most. Sarah swallowed her own tears, forcing herself to stay strong for her sister. "I know I'm not them, Emma, and I could never replace them. But I love you just as much as they did, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're safe and happy." Emma's expression softened, and she looked away, the fire in her eyes dimming. Sarah reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind Emma's ear. They stayed there, in silence, until Emma finally leaned into her sister, letting her guard down just a little. As the weeks went on, Sarah began to worry about Emma's performance at school. She received a call from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Green, who had noticed changes in Emma's behavior. Her grades were slipping, and she seemed distracted and distant in class. Mrs. Green suggested a meeting, and Sarah agreed, hoping they could work together to help Emma. On the day of the meeting, Sarah arrived at the school feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Mrs. Green was warm and understanding, and she welcomed Sarah into her office with a kind smile. "Emma's been through so much," Mrs. Green began gently. "It's only natural that she would struggle after such a loss. We want to make sure she knows she's supported both here and at home." Sarah nodded, grateful for Mrs. Green's empathy. "I'm doing my best, but it's been overwhelming. I feel like I'm failing her sometimes." Mrs. Green placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're doing a wonderful job, Sarah. It's clear that Emma feels safe with you, and that's the most important thing. The rest will come with time." They discussed ways to support Emma, both academically and emotionally. Mrs. Green suggested some counseling sessions at school, and Sarah agreed, hoping that speaking to a professional might help Emma process her grief. When she picked Emma up that afternoon, she gently broached the subject of counseling. Emma was hesitant at first, but Sarah explained that it could be a place where she could talk about anything she wanted, where she could share her feelings without judgment. "If you don't want to, you don't have to," Sarah reassured her. "But I think it might help. I think it would make Mom and Dad happy to see us taking care of ourselves." Emma thought for a moment before nodding slowly. "Okay, I'll try it." In the days that followed, Emma began attending her sessions, and Sarah could see small changes in her. She seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. She talked more openly about her feelings, even if it was just little by little, and Sarah was relieved to see her sister start to heal. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own struggles. The bills piled up, and with the cost of Emma's needs, things became tight. She cut back on expenses wherever she could, skipping small luxuries and working extra hours whenever possible. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but each time she felt herself wavering, she reminded herself of her promise. One evening, as Sarah was going over her budget, Emma wandered into the room and sat beside her. "Sarah?" Emma asked softly. "Yes, Em?" Emma looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. "Thank you for everything. I know it's hard, but I feel safe because of you." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She reached over, pulling Emma into a warm hug. "You're my sister, Emma, and I'd do anything for you." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the weight of responsibility and the fragile hope of new beginnings, Sarah realized that this bond, this love between sisters, was enough to keep them going, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As they pulled back, Emma smiled at her, a smile that was finally starting to reach her eyes again. It was a small victory, but for Sarah it felt like everything. Life began to take on a new rhythm, with Sarah and Emma slowly finding their footing in this new reality. Yet every small step forward was paired with challenges that threatened to set them back. Sarah juggled her increasing workload, balancing it with her role as Emma's guardian. Each night, as she finished her tasks, a new wave of responsibility washed over her, but she forced herself to focus on the love she felt for Emma, the promise she had made, and the tiny glimpses of peace they were both beginning to feel. One evening, Sarah sat on the worn couch, her mind wandering through their financial situation. The cost of school supplies, groceries, counseling sessions, and unexpected expenses had quickly added up. She felt trapped between wanting to give Emma everything and the harsh reality of their budget. She knew that she needed to find a solution that would help her stay afloat without compromising the little comforts they had managed to carve out. The next day at work, Sarah gathered the courage to ask Mr. Davis about any opportunities for growth or additional work. She hoped her efforts and dedication over the years might earn her a chance to advance or take on extra hours. Mr. Davis listened patiently, his kind eyes showing sympathy for her situation. "Sarah," he began thoughtfully, "you've been a valuable part of our team, and I know you're working harder than anyone. Right now, we don't have a promotion available, but we could look into offering you a few hours of overtime if you're interested." Relief washed over Sarah, and she thanked him sincerely. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. She left his office with a renewed sense of determination. She would find a way to make this work, one step at a time. That evening, she returned home with a lighter heart, finding Emma in the living room, her face glowing with an expression Sarah hadn't seen in a long time. Emma looked up and smiled, holding a book she'd borrowed from the school library. The book was about a young girl who discovered a secret garden and Emma seemed eager to share every detail with her. "You should read this with me, Sarah." Emma's eyes sparkled. "It's like an adventure. The garden is hidden and nobody knows about it except the girl." The idea of reading together reminded Sarah of nights when their mother would sit by their bedsides, sharing stories that transported them to other worlds. Smiling, Sarah nodded and settled beside Emma, wrapping an arm around her as Emma began reading aloud. The soft murmur of Emma's voice filled the room, bringing a warmth that made their apartment feel less empty and more like a home again. Over the following weeks, they established a new tradition of reading together every evening. They moved from one book to another, finding comfort in shared stories and characters who, like them, faced challenges but discovered courage along the way. This ritual became an anchor for them both, a time to escape the harsh realities of their lives and just be sisters, lost in the magic of a story. One Friday evening, after finishing another chapter, Sarah noticed that Emma had fallen asleep with her head resting on her shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude and love for her little sister. Even though she was exhausted from work and the weight of their responsibilities, moments like these reminded her of why she was fighting so hard. As Sarah carefully tucked Emma into bed, she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. It was a message from an old friend, asking if she wanted to catch up over coffee that weekend. Sarah hesitated, realizing it had been so long since she'd done anything for herself, since she had taken time to see her friends or relax, without worrying about everything she had to manage. The next morning, Sarah decided to take up the offer. She arranged for Emma to spend the afternoon at her friend's house, knowing it would give her sister a chance to have fun and laugh without the burden of grief weighing her down. At the coffee shop, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and guilt. Sitting across from her friend, she was reminded of her life before everything had changed, of the carefree days when her biggest concern was finishing a project or deciding what movie to watch. Her friend listened intently as Sarah recounted her journey, the struggles, the fears, and the small moments of joy that had carried her through. She was supportive, reminding Sarah that it was okay to lean on others for help, that she didn't have to carry everything alone. It was a conversation that filled Sarah with renewed strength, a reminder that there were people who cared about her, willing to support her whenever she needed. That evening, when she picked Emma up, she saw her sister's face light up as she ran out of the house, chatting excitedly about the games she'd played and the stories she'd shared with her friends. Sarah's heart swelled with relief, knowing Emma had been able to find moments of joy outside their small world of shared grief. Life continued in this way, with moments of connection balanced by the steady march of responsibility. But every so often, a new challenge would emerge to test Sarah's resilience. One afternoon, she received a call from her extended family, relatives who hadn't reached out since the accident. They were concerned, or at least that's what they claimed, and began questioning her ability to care for Emma. They gently suggested that Emma might be better off with a more established family member, one who could offer her a more stable life. The suggestion felt like a punch to Sarah's stomach. She tried to keep her voice steady, assuring them that she was fully capable of taking care of her sister. But the call left her shaken, her mind swirling with self-doubt and fear. Was she truly doing enough for Emma? Did she have the resources, the knowledge, the strength to be both sister and guardian? That night, as she lay awake, Sarah replayed the conversation in her mind, feeling the weight of their words press down on her. Her thoughts drifted to Emma, who was sleeping soundly in the next room, blissfully unaware of the doubts plaguing her older sister. The next morning, she reached out to Mrs. Green, Emma's teacher, who had become a trusted ally over the past few months. She shared her worries, hoping for some guidance or reassurance. Mrs. Green listened patiently, then gently reminded Sarah of all the progress Emma had made since the accident. "Emma feels safe with you, Sarah," Mrs. Green said. "I can see it in her behavior, in the way she's beginning to engage more with her friends and with her schoolwork. She's healing, even if it's slow. That's because of you." Hearing this gave Sarah a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that despite the hardships, she had created a home for Emma, a place where she could feel loved, protected, and valued. The doubts faded, replaced by a quiet determination to continue being there for her sister, no matter what anyone else said. As the days passed, Sarah grew more confident in her role. She learned to navigate their challenges with greater resilience, finding creative ways to stretch their budget, carving out time to connect with friends, and ensuring that Emma's needs were met emotionally and academically. She began to see herself not as a stand-in parent, but as a pillar of strength and love in Emma's life, a constant presence she could rely on. One evening, as they were sharing a late dinner, Emma looked up at Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "Sarah, do you think we'll ever stop missing them?" Emma's voice was soft, tinged with sadness, but also a hint of acceptance. Sarah reached across the table, holding Emma's hand. "I don't think we'll ever stop missing them, Em. But I think we'll get better at remembering them with love instead of just pain. They'll always be a part of us, and we'll carry them with us in everything we do." Emma smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. She squeezed Sarah's hand, and for the first time, Sarah felt that they were both moving toward healing, not by erasing the past, but by learning to live with it together. In that quiet moment, they both felt a sense of peace, knowing that as long as they had each other, they would find a way forward. As winter set in, the nights grew longer, and the small apartment took on a cozy warmth each evening as Sarah and Emma adjusted to their lives with growing ease. They had developed their routines and rituals, a steady rhythm that gave Emma a sense of security and provided Sarah with the assurance that she was doing something right. But with the holiday season approaching, the absence of their parents weighed heavily on both of them. Sarah wanted to make this time special, to bring joy back into their lives, but she wasn't sure how. One Saturday morning, Sarah took Emma to the local market. It was the first snowfall of the season, and the world was blanketed in white, making everything look fresh and new. They walked through the market stalls together, wrapped in thick scarves and mittens. The air was filled with the smell of cinnamon and pine, scents that immediately reminded Sarah of Christmases past, times when their mother would bake cookies and their father would set up the tree, humming cheerful carols. Emma was quiet as they strolled past the holiday decorations, her eyes lingering on a display of small, glittering ornaments. Sarah noticed the longing in her gaze and gently nudged her. "Do you want to pick out an ornament for our tree this year?" she asked. Emma looked up, a bit hesitant. "We don't have a tree, though." Sarah's heart ached at the thought. Their small apartment felt far from a home without the familiar sight of a twinkling Christmas tree. She crouched down to Emma's height and gave her a warm smile. "Then we'll get a tree. It doesn't have to be big, but it'll be ours, and you can pick the first ornament to put on it." Emma's eyes brightened, and she nodded eagerly, her fingers brushing over the various decorations until she found a small wooden angel painted in soft pastels. She held it up, her smile shy. "I like this one. It reminds me of Mom." Sarah swallowed, feeling the bittersweet tug at her heart, but she nodded. "It's perfect." They returned home with the angel and a small tree that Sarah had purchased at a corner shop. They spent the afternoon decorating it, stringing lights and placing tiny ornaments along the branches. Emma carefully hung the angel at the top, and when they stepped back to admire their work, both of them felt a sense of joy that had been missing from their lives. That night, they snuggled on the couch with mugs of hot chocolate, watching the lights twinkle on their tree. For the first time, Sarah felt that they had begun to truly build a life together, a life filled with new memories while still honoring the ones they had lost. As the holiday season continued, the two sisters grew closer. Emma's counseling sessions had begun to help her process her feelings, and Sarah noticed subtle changes in her. Emma's laugh was more frequent, her stories about school more detailed. She started to invite friends over occasionally, their laughter filling the apartment in a way that reminded Sarah of how full their lives had once been. Still, there were moments of struggle. Sarah continued to work long hours, pushing herself to keep up with the financial demands of their life together. She felt the pressure daily, especially as the end of the month loomed and bills piled up. She often sacrificed sleep and relaxation, determined to provide for Emma, even if it meant stretching herself thin. One night, Emma noticed Sarah looking tired, her face drawn, and her movements sluggish as she sorted through a stack of bills. "Sarah," Emma said softly, walking over to sit beside her. "Do you think... maybe I could help. I could get a small job after school. I don't mind." Sarah looked up in surprise, her heart swelling with pride, but also a bit of sadness. Emma was so young, too young to be worrying about things like money. She reached over and took her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. "That's really kind of you, Em, but your job right now is to focus on school and being a kid. Let me worry about the rest." Emma looked uncertain, as if she wanted to argue, but eventually she nodded. "Okay, but let me know if you need help. I can make dinner or clean up around the apartment or whatever you need." Sarah smiled, realizing how much Emma had grown in the past months. "You're already helping more than you know. Just having you here makes everything worth it." With the new year approaching, Sarah decided to set some resolutions. She sat down one evening with a notebook, making a list of goals for herself and for her life with Emma. She wanted to focus on saving money, managing her time more effectively, and, most importantly, continuing to be there emotionally for Emma. She was determined to create a future that would give both of them stability and happiness. In the middle of January, Sarah received unexpected news at work. Mr. Davis called her into his office, where he shared that a new project was opening up and that they would need a team leader to manage it. The project would require extra hours and greater responsibility, but it came with a significant pay increase. Mr. Davis offered her the position, acknowledging her hard work and dedication. The offer was a blessing, and Sarah accepted with gratitude, her heart racing at the thought of finally being able to ease some of their financial burdens. The extra income meant she could start a small college fund for Emma, giving her sister more options for the future. The project demanded long hours, but Sarah knew the sacrifice would be worth it. With her new responsibilities, however, came new challenges. There were nights when she had to work late, leaving Emma to handle dinner and homework on her own. Emma tried to be understanding, but there were moments of frustration when she missed her sister's presence, especially on nights when her homework was hard or when she felt lonely in the quiet apartment. One evening, as Sarah was working late, Emma tried to make dinner herself. She wanted to surprise her sister by having everything ready when she got home, hoping it would make Sarah happy. But halfway through cooking, she accidentally burned the pasta, filling the kitchen with smoke. Panicked, Emma opened the windows, fanning the smoke with a towel, her heart pounding as she tried to salvage the meal. When Sarah finally arrived home, she found Emma sitting at the table, her face pale and her eyes filled with tears. The burnt pasta sat in a pot nearby, and the smell lingered in the air. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to help, but I messed up." Sarah's heart broke as she saw the worry and disappointment in Emma's face. She wrapped her arms around her sister, pulling her close. "Emma, you didn't mess up. You tried to do something kind, and that means more to me than anything. Dinner doesn't have to be perfect for it to make me happy." Emma sniffled, hugging Sarah tightly. I know you're working so hard. I wanted to do something for you." They sat together, sharing a quiet moment that reminded Sarah of the bond they had built, one that could withstand burnt dinners, long work hours, and the ups and downs of their new life. She knew that no matter how challenging things became, they would continue to find a way through together. After cleaning up the kitchen, Sarah ordered a pizza, and they spent the rest of the night eating slices in their pajamas, watching an old comedy that made them laugh until their sides hurt. Moments like these reminded Sarah of the joy that could be found in the simplest things, even amidst the struggles. As winter gave way to spring, Sarah and Emma settled further into their lives, each challenge only strengthening their connection. Sarah's new position allowed them a bit more financial freedom, and she managed to set aside a little savings for emergencies. They even began talking about taking a short vacation together that summer, a way to celebrate all they had achieved and the family they had become. One night, as Sarah was tucking Emma into bed, her sister looked up, her face thoughtful. "Sarah, do you think Mum and Dad would be proud of us?" Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's forehead. "I know they would. They would be so proud of you, of how strong and brave you are. And I think they'd be proud of me too, for keeping my promise to take care of you." Emma's eyes softened, and she reached out to hug Sarah tightly. "I'm glad I have you," she whispered. As Sarah held her, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. Despite the hardships, they had built a life together, a life filled with love, laughter, and the quiet assurance that they would never be alone. And in that moment, Sarah knew that they would continue to find strength in each other, carrying their parents' legacy forward with every step they took. As spring arrived, bringing warmer days and blossoming trees, Sarah found herself thinking of new ways to create joyful memories for Emma. She wanted her sister to feel a sense of normalcy and freedom, a life that wasn't entirely overshadowed by grief and responsibility. The idea of a small trip, just the two of them, began to take shape in her mind. It wouldn't be anything extravagant, but a weekend escape might be exactly what they needed. After a few weeks of planning and saving from her new position's pay raise, Sarah was able to put together a small budget. She chose a modest cabin near a lake, just a couple of hours away, somewhere quiet and scenic, where they could relax and enjoy each other's company without the demands of daily life. She decided to surprise Emma with the plan one Friday after school. When Emma walked through the door, tired but in good spirits, Sarah greeted her with a warm smile and told her to pack a bag with her favorite clothes and books. "We're going somewhere special," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. Emma's face lit up, curiosity mixing with delight. "Where are we going?" Sarah put a finger to her lips. "You'll see. It's a surprise." The drive was filled with laughter and Emma's excited guesses. She alternated between looking out the window at the passing scenery and peppering Sarah with questions. As they pulled up to the little cabin nestled among trees, Emma's eyes widened in wonder. "It's so pretty, Sarah," she whispered, as if afraid to disturb the tranquility of the place. The cabin was small but cozy, with a view of the lake visible through the trees. They settled in quickly, with Emma rushing to explore every nook and cranny of their weekend home. That evening, they sat out by the lake, listening to the gentle sounds of nature around them. Emma leaned against Sarah, a contented smile on her face. "Thank you, Sarah," she murmured. "This is perfect." They spent the weekend kayaking on the lake, roasting marshmallows by a small fire, and taking leisurely walks through the woods. Each day felt like a small gift, a world apart from the responsibilities and worries they had left behind. On the final evening, as they watched the sun set over the water, Emma turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "I wish we could stay here forever," she said softly. "It feels like we're free from everything." Sarah placed an arm around Emma's shoulders, pulling her close. "I know, Em, but we'll carry this feeling with us. It's not about where we are, but who we're with. We'll take this peace back home with us, and whenever we need it, we can remember this weekend." They stayed until the stars dotted the sky, filling the dark night with a comforting light. As they sat in the quiet, Sarah thought of their parents, imagining them watching over the two of them, proud of the family they were becoming. The return to daily life after the trip wasn't easy, but the memories of the weekend lingered, bringing both sisters a renewed sense of joy and peace. Sarah noticed that Emma was smiling more, her laughter coming more freely. There were fewer nightmares and fewer quiet, withdrawn moments. Emma even began to take an interest in activities again, joining an art club at school, which became a new outlet for her emotions. One evening, as Emma was working on a drawing at the kitchen table, Sarah joined her, admiring the intricate lines and colors. "You're really good at this, Em," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. Emma looked up, her face lighting up with a pleased smile. "Thanks. Mrs. Green told me that art is a good way to let out my feelings. I think she's right." Sarah felt a swell of gratitude toward Mrs. Green, who had been a constant support for Emma. Through their small community of friends, teachers, and neighbors, Sarah was beginning to see that she wasn't raising Emma alone. Their world had expanded to include others who cared, who wanted to help them succeed and find happiness again. But as the school year came to an end, Sarah began to worry about the summer. She wouldn't have school to keep Emma occupied, and though she would be working full-time, she didn't want her sister to feel alone or isolated. One day at work, while chatting with a co-worker named Linda, Sarah mentioned her concerns. "Why don't you consider a summer camp?" Linda suggested. "There are a lot of day camps around here, and some even offer scholarships. It could be a great way for Emma to make friends and have fun while you're working." The idea appealed to Sarah, though she worried about the cost. But with Linda's encouragement, she researched a few local camps and found one that offered a variety of activities from art to sports, all geared toward helping kids build confidence and teamwork skills. With some help from her new savings and a small scholarship from the camp, Sarah was able to enroll Emma for the summer. When she told Emma the news, her sister's eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I've never been to camp before," she said, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Do you think I'll like it?" Sarah took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I think you'll love it. You'll get to try so many new things and meet people who might become really good friends." As summer arrived, Emma threw herself into the camp experience with enthusiasm. Each day, she returned home with stories of new friends, games, and activities that left her tired but happy. Sarah felt a sense of relief and pride every time she saw Emma's joyful expressions, knowing that her sister was beginning to thrive. One evening, after a long day at camp, Emma handed Sarah a small friendship bracelet she had made. "I made this for you," she said, her cheeks pink with pride. "It's to say thank you for everything." Sarah accepted the bracelet, her eyes misting with tears. She slipped it onto her wrist, feeling the warmth of Emma's gratitude and love. "Thank you, Em. I'll wear it always." By the time school started again in the fall, both sisters felt more resilient and connected. Emma had grown over the summer, her confidence blooming in ways that Sarah hadn't anticipated. She was more independent, eager to share her thoughts and feelings, and ready to face the new school year with a fresh sense of purpose. As for Sarah, she had finally found her footing as Emma's guardian. She knew there would still be challenges, but she no longer doubted her ability to face them. She had learned to ask for help when she needed it, to lean on the people who cared about her and Emma, and to trust in the strength of their bond. One crisp autumn evening, as they were preparing dinner, Emma looked up with a thoughtful expression. "Sarah," she began hesitantly, "do you think we're like a family now?" Sarah paused, her heart swelling at the question. She turned to Emma, her face softening. "We've always been a family, Em. Even when it was just the two of us, we had each other. That's what family is, people who love you and stay with you no matter what." Emma smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. "I'm glad it's you. I wouldn't want it any other way." As they sat down to eat, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment. They had come so far together, through heartbreak and healing, through struggles and small victories. And now, as the leaves turned and the nights grew longer, they faced the future with a shared strength, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of their small, hard-won life, Sarah and Emma understood that they were no longer defined by what they had lost. Instead, they were defined by the love they shared, a love that had carried them through the darkest of times and would continue to light their way forward. With autumn in full swing, Sarah and Emma settled into a new phase of life, their days structured but not burdened, filled with routines that brought both comfort and connection. The transition back to school had been smooth for Emma, and Sarah was steadily adjusting to the demands of her job. Yet, as they grew more comfortable, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was still carrying an unspoken weight. Although her sister was flourishing in many ways, there were moments when Sarah would catch Emma staring off into the distance, her face thoughtful, sometimes shadowed by an invisible sadness. One evening, as they were sitting on the couch with mugs of tea in hand, Sarah decided to address it. She had learned, through her own journey with grief, that silence could sometimes deepen pain rather than soothe it. "Emma," she began gently, "you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Emma looked up, a little surprised. She nodded, her eyes reflecting a flicker of hesitation. "I know. Is there something on your mind? Something that's been bothering you?" Emma took a deep breath, staring down into her mug. "Sometimes I think about Mum and Dad," she said quietly. "I know it's been a while, but it's like I'm afraid I'll forget them." Sarah's heart tightened, understanding the feeling all too well. She reached over and took way to honor their parents' memory through an act of giving, a reminder that love and generosity could be woven into even the simplest of gestures. The baking day became the first of their new traditions, a small but significant ritual that strengthened the bond between them and connected them to their community. Emma glowed with pride, her excitement bubbling over as she planned what they might do for the next year's batch of holiday treats. As winter settled in, Sarah and Emma's life felt more stable, filled with routines and rituals that gave them both a sense of peace. One evening, as they were putting up their small Christmas tree, Emma paused, looking at the angel ornament they had chosen the year before. "We should get another one," she said thoughtfully. "One that represents this year to show how far we've come." Sarah felt a wave of emotion rise within her, amazed at Emma's wisdom and strength. "That's a beautiful idea, Em." They picked out a small hand-painted star, its colours bright and warm, symbolising the growth and resilience they had found together. When they hung it beside the angel, the tree sparkled with the memories of both their past and the new family they were building together. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the tree wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa as they reflected on the journey they had shared. The quiet joy between them was a testament to all they had overcome. In each other they had found a strength neither of them had known they possessed, a bond forged through loss, but solidified in love. As they sat together in the soft glow of the tree lights, Emma looked up, her face serene. "Sarah, do you think this will always be our life?" Sarah paused, considering her sister's question. "I don't know what the future holds, Em, but I do know that no matter where we go or what we face, we'll always have each other. And that's all we really need." Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, letting out a contented sigh. "I think you're right. I feel like we're finally home." In that quiet moment, Sarah realized that they had come full circle. Their home was no longer defined by the four walls of a house or the presence of their parents. It was built through the love, resilience, and shared memories they had created together. It was a home that could withstand any storm, a life filled with traditions old and new, and a bond that would carry them forward into whatever the future held. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sarah held her sister close, feeling the warmth of their shared life surround them like a protective shield. They had faced the unthinkable together, and now, with hearts full and spirits stronger than ever, they looked toward the future with hope, ready for whatever new chapters lay ahead. The new year brought fresh opportunities for both Sarah and Emma. Emma was thriving at school, more confident and connected than she had been since their parents' passing. She poured herself into her art club and even signed up to participate in the Spring Talent Showcase, where she planned to display some of her artwork. Sarah was proud beyond words, watching her sister embrace life with a resilience that had once seemed impossible. Meanwhile, Sarah's workload continued to increase, but she managed to balance her responsibilities at home with a renewed sense of purpose. Her small but steady savings were beginning to grow, and she felt a sense of pride knowing she was creating a secure future for Emma. The job had turned into more than just a paycheck. It was a lifeline, a means of stability for the life they were building. But life, with all its unexpected twists, soon threw them a new challenge. One morning, Sarah received a call from her aunt, who informed her that her grandmother had fallen ill and was in need of care. Sarah's aunt had her own family obligations and couldn't be there as often as she wanted, and she gently suggested that Sarah consider visiting to help out. The thought of being away from Emma, even for a short time, filled Sarah with worry. But she knew that family was everything, and the bond she had with her grandmother was precious. After a long discussion with Emma, who listened with understanding and maturity beyond her years, Sarah decided to make the trip, reassured by her aunt's offer to keep an eye on Emma during her absence. The night before Sarah's departure, she and Emma shared a quiet dinner. Emma's expression was thoughtful, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and determination. "Are you sure you'll be okay here without me?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with worry. Emma nodded, reaching across the table to hold Sarah's hand. "I'll be fine. You've taught me how to take care of myself, and Aunt Linda will be close by. Besides, Grandma needs you." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Emma's confidence reassured her, and she knew this trip would be an opportunity for both of them to grow in different ways. It was a way to honor their parents' memory through an act of giving, a reminder that love and generosity could be woven into even the simplest of gestures. The baking day became the first of their new traditions, a small but significant ritual that strengthened the bond between them and connected them to their community. Emma glowed with pride, her excitement bubbling over as she planned what they might do for the next year's batch of holiday treats. As winter settled in, Sarah and Emma's life felt more stable, filled with routines and rituals that gave them both a sense of peace. One evening, as they were putting up their small Christmas tree, Emma paused, looking at the angel ornament they had chosen the year before. "We should get another one," she said thoughtfully. "One that represents this year to show how far we've come." Sarah felt a wave of emotion rise within her, amazed at Emma's wisdom and strength. "That's a beautiful idea, Em." They picked out a small hand-painted star, its colors bright and warm, symbolizing the growth and resilience they had found together. When they hung it beside the angel, the tree sparkled with the memories of both their past and the new family they were building together. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the tree wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa as they reflected on the journey they had shared. The quiet joy between them was a testament to all they had overcome. In each other they had found a strength neither of them had known they possessed, a bond forged through loss, but solidified in love. As they sat together in the soft glow of the tree lights, Emma looked up, her face serene. "Sarah, do you think this will always be our life?" Sarah paused, considering her sister's question. "I don't know what the future holds, Em, but I do know that no matter where we go or what we face, we'll always have each other. And that's all we really need." Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, letting out a contented sigh. "I think you're right. I feel like we're finally home." In that quiet moment, Sarah realized that they had come full circle. Their home was no longer defined by the four walls of a house or the presence of their parents. It was built through the love, resilience, and shared memories they had created together. It was a home that could withstand any storm, a life filled with traditions old and new, and a bond that would carry them forward into whatever the future held. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sarah held her sister close, feeling the warmth of their shared life surround them like a protective shield. They had faced the unthinkable together, and now, with hearts full and spirits stronger than ever, they looked toward the future with hope, ready for whatever new chapters lay ahead. The new year brought fresh opportunities for both Sarah and Emma. Emma was thriving at school, more confident and connected than she had been since their parents' passing. She poured herself into her art club and even signed up to participate in the Spring Talent Showcase, where she planned to display some of her artwork. Sarah was proud beyond words, watching her sister embrace life with a resilience that had once seemed impossible. Meanwhile, Sarah's workload continued to increase, but she managed to balance her responsibilities at home with a renewed sense of purpose. Her small but steady savings were beginning to grow, and she felt a sense of pride knowing she was creating a secure future for Emma. The job had turned into more than just a paycheck. It was a lifeline, a means of stability for the life they were building. But life, with all its unexpected twists, soon threw them a new challenge. One morning, Sarah received a call from her aunt, who informed her that her grandmother had fallen ill and was in need of care. Sarah's aunt had her own family obligations and couldn't be there as often as she wanted, and she gently suggested that Sarah consider visiting to help out. The thought of being away from Emma, even for a short time, filled Sarah with worry. But she knew that family was everything, and the bond she had with her grandmother was precious. After a long discussion with Emma, who listened with understanding and maturity beyond her years, Sarah decided to make the trip, reassured by her aunt's offer to keep an eye on Emma during her absence. The night before Sarah's departure, she and Emma shared a quiet dinner. Emma's expression was thoughtful, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and determination. "Are you sure you'll be okay here without me?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with worry. Emma nodded, reaching across the table to hold Sarah's hand. "I'll be fine. You've taught me how to take care of myself, and Aunt Linda will be close by. Besides, Grandma needs you." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Emma's confidence reassured her, and she knew this trip would be an opportunity for both of them to grow in different ways. The following day, Sarah left with a heavy heart but a sense of duty. Her grandmother's house, a cozy home nestled in a quiet neighborhood, held many memories of her childhood. Stepping through the door brought a mix of nostalgia and sadness, but her grandmother's warm smile quickly reminded her of why she had come. The days she spent caring for her grandmother were both rewarding and challenging. Sarah found herself stepping into yet another caretaking role, managing her grandmother's medications, preparing meals, and helping with small tasks around the house. In the quiet moments, they reminisced about the past, sharing stories that made Sarah laugh and cry in equal measure. Through these stories, Sarah found a renewed appreciation for her family's legacy, for the love and resilience that had been passed down through generations. During her absence, Emma and Aunt Linda stayed in close contact. Linda often checked in after school, bringing homemade dinners and helping Emma with her homework. Though Emma missed Sarah, she found comfort in the community that surrounded her. She spent evenings working on her art for the talent showcase, pouring her emotions into each piece, using her art as a means of connection and expression. One evening, Emma called Sarah to give her an update. Her voice was cheerful, her words spilling out in a mix of excitement and pride. "I'm almost done with my big painting for the showcase," she announced. "It's of the tree we used to sit under at the park with Mom and Dad. I wanted to make it as beautiful as I remember." Sarah's heart warmed at the thought. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. I can't wait to see it. It sounds like it'll be amazing." Emma hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you think they'd be proud of me too?" Sarah's voice softened, filled with certainty. "I know they would be, Em. You're honoring them every day with your strength and your kindness. That's the best way we can keep them with us." After 2 weeks, Sarah returned home. The first night back, she and Emma stayed up late, catching up on everything that had happened in their time apart. Emma proudly showed Sarah her completed painting, and as Sarah gazed at it, she felt tears prick her eyes. The painting was beautiful, capturing not only the details of the tree, but the essence of the memories tied to it. It was a visual testament to their journey, a symbol of the love and resilience that held them together. Emma's talent showcase took place in early spring, and Sarah made sure to take the day off work to attend. The event was held in the school's large auditorium, filled with parents, teachers, and students, all eager to see the talent on display. Sarah sat in the front row, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her sister's work displayed on stage. When it was Emma's turn to present her piece, she walked to the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This painting is called Remembering Home," she began. "It's about a special place that my family used to visit. It's where I felt safe and loved, and I made this painting to remember those times. Even though things have changed, I still feel their love, and I carry it with me every day." The audience was silent, moved by Emma's words and the depth of feeling in her artwork. Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks, overcome by her sister's courage and grace. Emma had transformed her grief into something beautiful, and in that moment Sarah knew that Emma had found her own way of keeping their parents' memory alive. After the showcase, Sarah hugged Emma tightly, her voice thick with emotion. "That was beautiful, Em. You did something truly special." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I felt like they were with me, and I felt like I was finally ready to share that part of my heart." In the days that followed, Sarah noticed a newfound lightness in Emma. She was more open, more willing to talk about her feelings, and her laughter seemed fuller, free from the shadows that had once lingered. Their relationship deepened, with each of them finding strength in the other as they continued to navigate the complexities of life without their parents. As spring turned to summer, Sarah and Emma decided to take on another project together, creating a small garden in their backyard. It was a way to honor their parents' love of nature and to build something tangible that they could nurture and grow together. They spent weekends digging, planting, and watering, turning the small patch of dirt into a blossoming array of flowers and vegetables. One afternoon, as they were planting lavender along the edges of the garden, Emma looked up, her face thoughtful. "Sarah, do you think this is how they would want us to live, to be happy and to keep going, even though they're not here?" Sarah paused, wiping dirt from her hands, and met Emma's gaze. "I think they would want us to live fully, to find joy and love in everything we do. And I think they'd be proud of us for choosing to keep going, even when it's hard." Emma nodded, a soft smile spreading across her face. "I think you're right, and maybe, just maybe, they're watching over us, making sure we're okay." As they finished planting, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She and Emma had come so far, from grief-stricken days of uncertainty to building a life rooted in love and resilience. They had learned not only to survive, but to thrive, to find beauty in each new season, and to create a world that was uniquely theirs. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah and Emma sat by their newly planted garden, watching as fireflies began to twinkle in the growing darkness. They didn't need to speak. The peace between them was enough, a silent understanding that whatever the future held, they would face it together. With the garden blooming and their lives filled with memories both old and new, Sarah and Emma knew they had created something that would last. A home built not just of walls but of shared love, resilience, and the gentle reminder that they would always carry their parents' legacy forward, blooming beautifully in every corner of their lives. As the garden flourished, so did Sarah and Emma's life together. They had created a sanctuary, a place filled with warmth, growth, and memories both old and new. Their days were steady, filled with school and work, shared dinners, and moments in their backyard oasis. The two sisters, once bound by the shared weight of grief, were now bound by love, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. The pain of their loss hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, blending with the beauty of the life they were building. One evening, as summer faded into early autumn, Emma received an invitation to participate in a local art exhibit. Her school had recommended her painting from the talent showcase, and the gallery wanted to feature it as part of a collection on community and resilience. The news filled both Emma and Sarah with pride and excitement. For Emma, it was an opportunity to share her story with even more people, and for Sarah, it was a confirmation of how far her sister had come. The day of the exhibit arrived, and Sarah took the afternoon off work to help Emma prepare. They chose a soft, sky-blue dress for Emma, one that matched the peaceful tone of her painting, Remembering Home. As they drove to the gallery, Sarah noticed Emma's hands trembling slightly in her lap. "Nervous?" Sarah asked gently. Emma nodded, looking out the window. "A little. I'm excited, but I keep thinking about what people will see when they look at the painting. It's like they'll be seeing a part of me." Sarah reached over and took Emma's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "What they'll see is the strength and love you carry with you. They'll see how brave you are to share such a personal story." Emma smiled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done any of this without you." The gallery was filled with art lovers, community members, and students when they arrived. Sarah and Emma moved through the crowd, stopping at each exhibit, admiring the diverse artwork around them. When they reached Emma's painting, Remembering Home, they stood together, quietly taking it in. The painting of the familiar tree, captured in rich hues and detailed brushstrokes, seemed to radiate the warmth and safety of their childhood memories. As people stopped to look, Emma received compliments, some people asking about the inspiration behind her work. Emma explained her story with a grace and maturity that left Sarah in awe. She spoke of the park, her family's love, and how she used art to express emotions that words couldn't fully capture. Each person who listened seemed moved, offering words of encouragement and admiration. Emma glowed with pride, her confidence blossoming in a way that filled Sarah's heart with joy. By the end of the evening, Emma's painting had attracted considerable attention, and even a local reporter asked if he could feature it in an article about the exhibit. It was a proud moment, a celebration of Emma's journey and resilience, and a testament to the life she and Sarah had built together. That night, after they returned home and Emma was tucked into bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room, reflecting on everything they had been through. The years of grief, adjustment, and quiet resilience had brought them to this moment, a moment where they had transformed pain into something beautiful. She realized that in caring for her sister, she had also found herself discovering a strength she hadn't known she possessed. As autumn turned to winter, life continued with its steady rhythm. The challenges didn't disappear. There were still bills to pay, long work hours, and the occasional difficult day. But the love and understanding between Sarah and Emma kept them grounded. They celebrated Emma's small victories, like getting an A in her art class or volunteering to help younger students at school. And Sarah, in turn, began taking time for herself, reaching out to old friends, and even considering taking a part-time art course inspired by Emma's passion. One evening, in early December, as they decorated their Christmas tree, Emma paused, holding the star ornament they had chosen the year before. She looked at Sarah, a shy but hopeful smile on her face. "Do you think it's okay if we invite a few people over for Christmas this year?" she asked. "Maybe Aunt Linda, or some of my friends?" Sarah's heart warmed at the thought. Emma, once so withdrawn and hesitant, was opening her life to others, finding joy in sharing their home with people they loved. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Em," Sarah replied. "Let's make this Christmas a time to celebrate everything and everyone that's brought us here." Together they made plans, filling the house with decorations, baking cookies, and even setting up extra chairs for their small but meaningful gathering. When Christmas arrived, their apartment was filled with laughter, warmth, and the love of friends and family. Emma glowed as she introduced her aunt and friends to the life she and Sarah had created, and Sarah couldn't help but feel that this was what her parents would have wanted, a home filled with joy, kindness, and resilience. That evening, after everyone had left and the house had quieted, Sarah and Emma sat together by the tree, reflecting on their journey. The lights twinkled softly, casting a warm glow that wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. "Sarah," Emma said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "do you remember when we first put up a tree after Mum and Dad were gone? It felt empty, like something was missing." Sarah nodded, remembering the ache of that first Christmas, the way they had both felt lost. "Yes, I remember." Emma smiled, her gaze steady and strong. "But now, it feels different. It feels full." Sarah's throat tightened as she looked at her sister, amazed by the wisdom in her young eyes. "That's because we've filled it with our own memories, our love, and the life we've made together." Emma leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder, closing her eyes. "I don't feel afraid anymore, Sarah. I feel like we'll always be okay, as long as we have each other." In that quiet, peaceful moment, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment. They had come so far, and while the journey had been painful, it had led them to a place of healing, a place where love had woven itself into every corner of their lives. The memories of their parents would always be a part of them, but they had created something new, something uniquely theirs, built on a foundation of resilience and an unbreakable bond. As the clock struck midnight, marking the arrival of a new day and a new year on the horizon, Sarah and Emma sat together in their home, knowing that they were no longer defined solely by loss. They were defined by the life they had built, the love they shared, and the strength they found within each other. And in that moment, Sarah knew that no matter where life took them, they would always carry this home in their hearts, a home rooted in family, love, and a resilience that would guide them through all the seasons of their lives,